What is going on, guys? It's Everett here, and in this video we're going to talk about flexibility and stretching and strength training. So a lot of common questions are, does stretching hurt my strength? Does it make me slower, weaker? Does it make me more injury prone? When should I stretch? How flexible should I be? So we're going to cover a lot of that stuff in this video. But before we get started, if you've just come across my channel, this is really the main theme of the channel. It's flexibility integrated in with strength and conditioning or athletic performance, and we call that mobility, your range of motion, but the ability to control and contract your muscles and be fast and strong within that range. So if you like that, consider subscribing. So it's pretty common to hear someone say, oh man, I was really plateauing my lifts, or I was just getting nagging injuries, and then I started focusing on my flexibility or my mobility, and I felt way better and my performance went up. Or you hear the exact opposite thing. Man, I started stretching a lot and my lift started to feel weird. My strength decreased. I really lost my explosive power within the lifts. So I tend to believe both of those camps of people because everybody's different. Now, not everyone's a unique snowflake. That's not what I mean, but I mean there's different groups of people. So instead of just tell you, yes, you need to stretch, or no, never stretch, that's BS, I want to break down the different types of camps of people that I see as a trainer dealing with individuals and groups. So that way you can try to figure out where you fit in and what you as an individual need to do for your circumstances and how those circumstances might change down the road, and you have an idea of what you need to adjust. So here we go. So the first thing I want to talk about is the strength length curve of the muscle. So as you take your muscles really long and really short, you're weaker on either end compared to right in the middle of that length. So if you're a gym goer, you should know that dead hang pull-ups, pretty tough. Hitting a really controlled chest to bar pull-up, also pretty tough. If you want to bang out a lot of reps, just doing the middle part, partial reps, a lot easier. So that's not to say you should never do partial reps. It's a great way to put the muscle in a lot of stress, time under tension, and you'll grow your muscles. But I'm just using that as an example of the ends of your range of motion, typically weaker. Now that's when you're moving. Say you were to lay down on your back and your buddy was to do that classic hamstring stretch where they lift your leg up. You would be able to stretch in a relaxed position further than you could lift your own leg up. So typically you've got like maybe 10 to 15 degrees on either end that you could relax into here, all right? So we've got strength in the middle, less strength, and then passive range of motion, meaning you're relaxed. So the first type of people that I categorize are what I call compensators. Now these are people, for whatever reason, they really have barely any range of motion for the tasks that they're doing. So say they've only sat in a chair for like 30 years at a desk job. They've only ever sat to about 90 degrees at their hips, and now they do CrossFit and they need more range of motion. Say they need like 100 degrees to hit hip to knee for a back squat to count. So they don't have that range of motion at their hips. So they're going to draw upon other parts of their body to help get them hip to knee in that squat. And this is one reason why you'll see people butt wink. So they'll start to arch their low back, or maybe they do this at the knees. Their knees dump really far forward in front of their toes. Again, not a bad thing if you Olympic lift, but if you're using that as a compensation, it's not good for you. It's gonna tax your performance and could cause injuries. So for those people, they need to stretch. They need to stretch for safety and just being able to go to the gym consistently so they don't get injured. Getting them to have the prerequisite range of motion is essential for, again, performance and just the health of their joints and safety, things like that. So those people absolutely do need to stretch. Now, they don't just need to stop doing CrossFit and start doing yoga. I'll get to that in a second. But they absolutely can benefit from a lot of time spent doing mobility training. Now, the second people I call plateauers, and these are people who have essentially the range of motion. So they're typically younger, they're in better shape just because, again, they haven't damaged their bodies or sat around sitting for like 30 years. And so they can hit that back squat hip to knee. However, if we look at this curve, they're right at their active range of motion, which means they're weaker. So I call them plateauers because typically they can add strength from being on a back squat program for a while, but at a certain point, they have to really start bouncing out of the bottom of the squat. They lose control or strength, and so their 5 rep max is really close to their 3 rep max, which is very close to their 1 rep max. So they hit this cliff. They're like going, 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 and then add a couple pounds and they just fall off and they fail that lift. Because again, they're already struggling just to be in that position, and they do get stronger with training, but at a certain point, they have to fix this weak link. So some people fix that weak link by adding an accessory work and fixing on the muscles that are weak in that bottom position. That could absolutely be the case, but I find for a lot of people in this day and age, 2020, the weak link is mobility. So just by doing some stretching, not too much, but some mobility work, we can increase this curve. So now instead of hitting in the hole of the squat, the bottom, they're right here. Now they're automatically right here. So they're just a little bit stronger. So those that usually the people that say, man, I was stalling out, starting to get a little injured. I did some mobility and wow, I really started to break through that plateau. I just feel better. So those people you often hear say things like that in the gym. And again, I completely believe that that's what happened. On another note, these people are right at the end of their active range of motion. So they say they're trying to PR their back squat and they go heavy as they should be, but the lift goes wrong. They get pushed into this zone. It might just be a failed lift, or it could turn into an injury, depending on if they've got safety pins or someone really good spotting them, or they're just lucky. So we want to get these people doing some precise mobility work in with their squatting program to make sure they're staying safe during the maximal lifts, and we get them more into this middle part of the curve to break through those plateaus and keep their progress going. Once again, we don't want to do a whole lot of mobility work or flexibility work during this time. I'll get to why in a second. Our final group I call excess passive range of motion people. You can think of these people as hyper flexible, hyper mobile people. These are people who have very little muscle. A lot of times, not all the times, a lot of times girls fall into this camp, and you know, people have just done yoga as their form of like fitness or exercise. Is it wrong to be super flexible? Absolutely not. But if you're trying to mix in flexibility with strength training, this is where you get the group of people that say, man, I was getting nagging injuries, I just wasn't feeling good, so I went and did 30 days of yoga, came back and I was weaker. Came back and I actually got a little tweak, a small injury when I went back to strength training. So that's because flexibility doesn't carry right over into mobility, i.e. controlling your range of motion. So oftentimes going back up to these people, because they feel like such crap when they're lifting initially, they go, okay, I need to back up and focus on my form and my flexibility. So those people go do a bunch of yoga and stretching, get massage therapy done. They come back and they actually kind of turn themselves into these people, which either end isn't very good. So with these people, what we need to do is they've got a much larger graph, but they still only have their active range of motion. Right in the middle, they just have huge passive ranges of motion. So these people, you'll see squat butt to heels, but they'll bounce out of the bottom. They'll get that huge back curve going on. And again, it works for them at light weights, but they also turn into plateau people. They break down really quick and they still get injured. They just get injured in a different way because again, they're bouncing off their joints. They have too much passive range of motion that they can't control. Add in load and they get injured. So these people, we need to not stretch. We need to train them how to control the end ranges of motion so that they're safer and that they can perform as well. One final point about these very flexible people, I do full body mobility assessments. So I really isolate joints and see what each joint can do in active and passive ranges. And I will sometimes get these people that have surprisingly, and I mean shockingly, little range of motion in certain areas. So say like internal hip rotation. Now it makes sense because the rest of their body is so loose and flexible that they're able to move without really involving that internal hip rotation. So they can compensate around it. So they're like mini compensators sometimes. So in those cases, this is why we need to do assessments and be precise. We can assign more flexibility training to get increased range of motion at very specific points. But for the most part, and most of the time, we're just looking at mobility, increasing control and strength over their really big flexibility zones. So once again, this is not an exhaustive list and it's just off of my experience and the concepts that I use to train strength and conditioning and mobility. You might see subcategories in either one of these, or you might add a fourth person, but try to figure out where you are, and it's easy. Have you sat at a desk for a long time? Have you always been chronically tight? Probably here. Are you 19 years old and just started lifting, getting into fitness, but you have some sort of sports background? In 2020, you're probably here because you text a lot and you sit a lot, but you're still relatively healthy and have decent range of motion, and you're probably making some gains in the gym. Or you probably know who you are. Are you really, really flexible? Right here. Don't just try to stretch away the pain. Or if you get tweaked from doing a fitness class for the first time, don't think you need to stretch to fix it. Focus on your technique and controlling your really loose ranges of motion at either end, okay? So now, of course, you're wondering, well, how do I apply this information? What do I do with it? And that's the point of my entire channel, the major theme. So I have a lot of specific videos on stretches and movements to increase your mobility. The point of this video was to lay out the concepts so that those videos make more sense and to answer some of the questions we went over in the initial part of the video and get through some of those misconceptions, all right? But to put it simply, if you want bigger biceps, you don't just work out your upper body, you work out your biceps. So find the ranges of motion that you need to increase flexibility within, do the right stretches in the right way, the right amounts for you, and then as quickly as you can or simultaneously convert that passive range of motion into active range of motion, i.e. mobility. So I hope that clears up some of the misconceptions about flexibility and stretching and strength training and puts you in the right direction right from the get-go. So as always, if you like the video, hit the like button. That's what it's there for. It really helps other people find this information, which helps them out as well. And if you want a full hip mobility course, well, I made one. I've got 16 videos, 2.5 hours of content. It's laid out like an education course all about hip mobility. So flexibility plus control and strength on my website, link in the description. Check it out. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.